It is. Yeah, I don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hitting the Apex. Evan, thanks for joining me on this Monday.
It's an interesting Monday that we've had so far after a very interesting weekend that we had.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, mixed opinion on this new generation of cars. Apparently, there's too much passing. I don't know what's happened, but we'll dig into that. And I do fear we've entered the year of George Russell, unfortunately, but we'll get into that. I guess we'll start the way we always do with our predictions. So, Evan, you had Leclerc winning, Norris second, Piastri third, Alpine top seven. Nope, and nope. I will say, for a few laps there, you looked like you'd pulled a coup with that Leclerc pick the way he started, but obviously the pit sequence and all that. We'll get into that in a little bit. I had Russell winning, score one there. For my prediction, not for my not for my head. And then I had Leclerc second, Antonelli third. Obviously, that was reversed. My surprise was that Hajar finishes in front of Max, which I felt really good about until his car blew up. He obviously we'll get into that a little bit in Max's scuffling and qualifying, and I felt really good about that going into the race and that Hajar's car blew up. Carly had Max, and then Charles, and then Lando. So none of those were correct. Alpine top five. She tried to one up you. You were both wrong. Although Gasly did finish 10th, which is
he did
a lot better than last year. And then Morgan had Charles first, Max second, Lando third. Those were not correct. However, he did nail Audi top 10 because our guy Gabriel Bortoleto finished ninth. So he did nail that one. Yeah, Carly in the chat here. No, Max decided to bin it in qualifying. So I guess let's start with that, right? So there was a lot of. I guess we should start with the back of the grid. The Aston Martins, I guess, showed up with not enough batteries to really. So obviously, just to recap, this is the first time they're really driving their race spec cars. They do testing, but there's always mismatched parts and all this. And actually, other than the works teams, they don't necessarily have the full engine and all the modes and stuff yet. The only time they have to deliver that is the first weekend. So this is the first time that they all have their full race car, and Aston Martin basically couldn't run significantly in the practice because they only had two batteries. Like if one of these goes, we can't rate. They don't have extras, which is astonishing for a major car manufacturer to not show up with enough into the season with spare parts. But that's where they were at. So they barely ran, and then there was a lot of sliding around, especially as it got later into the practice sessions. But before we get into qualifying, which we'll talk about in a second, what was, I guess, your initial take on how the cars, looked as we were going through those practice sessions?
Well, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week where we mentioned that we weren't really going to see the true pace of these cars until that Q3, Q2, running of it. But the one thing that you did mention on your intro there that I didn't even know about going into this weekend until they even mentioned it there was, they didn't have the full spec of these engines until just this week, just going into this first race, and you could really really tell the difference of these cars, especially how they ended up at the end of the weekend. At the end of the race, that those two manufacturers of the two best engines on the grid between Mercedes and Ferrari, they really had a handle on how to use these engines and how to use those different drive modes and how to make the best out of the regen, and the battery management throughout the race. I mean, George Russell was pretty much cruising, throughout the entirety of qualifying, and even, after that first, stint of the race before Ferrari made another Ferrari bonehead move and didn't pit their guys during the VRS. But even during qualifying, you could just tell that they had a different type of swagger to them. They had a different type of push to them, and they could get to a different level with these cars than everybody else could, just because they had a handle
And
on how the cars were. McLaren, they were pushing as hard as they could, and they were just miles off.
yeah, well, what do you think about? So I saw this breakdown of kind of why it was a side by side of and it was from the cockpit, so you kind of see the revs and on the engine side by side of George Russell, Leclerc, and Lando Norris, and they really showed that the reason Mercedes is so far ahead, at least in that race, was just the efficiency with which they could charge their batteries. So they were showing like how much battery he was deploying, and so at the beginning of the lap, it was kind of even. It's like by the back half of the app, like the lap, he was able to go 15 miles per hour faster on the straights because he had so much more battery harvested. So I think they're just really efficient on that. But what's your overall take on this? I know it's been controversial with, they have to, it's 50%, I believe, IC, 50% battery at this point, which is a big change. Last generation was like 80/20.
Yeah.
So they're basically having to charge in areas where they normally would be pushing. And that's obviously been controversial, including, that whole super clipping thing, which for those that aren't aware, when they're flooring it on the straight now, there is a mode where they can redirect some of that power instead of going to the engine, making the car go faster, it goes to charge the battery. So there's a lot of controversy about that. A lot of people saying lifting on the straights. There is a bit of that because it charges more when you lift, but a lot of it is really just redirecting the engine power back into the battery. So it's been controversial, and we did see at the beginning of the race a lot of pass back because you use the battery to pass, then you don't have it anymore, and then the guy behind you's been charging it that time, so you can take it, pass you back. I guess what's your overall take? We're going to talk through qualifying and Max crashing, of course, we're not leaving that out, and then also, Oscar not even making the grid. But
Yeah.
before doing that, just overall, what do you feel about the cars and kind of how that whole 50-50 battery split? There's rumors that they're thinking about maybe making some adjustments. What was your take?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have to remember that the Albert Park is one of those tracks that's very high speed, not very many real tough braking zones. Braking is what really charges these batteries up. Braking is where you get the biggest gains, in regards to juicing up that battery, getting the most out of that regen system. That's where you get the most out of it. And at a place like Albert Park, you don't do as much hard braking as you do at some of the other more dedicated tracks like Bahrain, where we did the testing, like you know Abu Dhabi, like even some of the place like Monaco, where literally they're braking for pretty much more than half the lap. You get a lot more in those situations out of the batteries, and how you're able to deploy them, how you're able to recharge them, how you're able to use them, because you're able to, again, like I said, recharge them a little bit more efficiently, a little bit better. Um, Here at China, going into this week, we'll see when we do the track preview. It's a similar situation. There's not a lot of braking situations. There's some really good ones like turn 14. We'll talk about that when we talk about the track preview. But um, you know, there's gonna be times in some of these longer straight tracks, or some of these tracks that with the longer straights, Monza here, where these cars are gonna have that issue, where they're gonna have the super clipping, where they're gonna not be as fast as what we've seen. It's weird to watch qualifying and seeing George Russell 3/4 of the way down that straight in Albert Park, right before the one of the most exciting chicanes in all of Formula One, lifting off the throttle and coasting going into it. It's strange to see that. We're not used to seeing the best drivers in the world have to, you know, basically manage these cars like this. This is something you see in, endurance racing and 24-hour racing. You see a lot of stuff like this happen because they're just trying to make the cars last for those 24 hours. This shouldn't be how it is in Grand Prix racing. This shouldn't be how it is in the pinnacle of Formula One. I personally don't like. I think they need to maybe adjust something, maybe give a little bit more turbo power or a little bit more turbo pressure. Let them increase the output of the engine. If it's 500 horsepower out of the engine, 500 horsepower out of the battery pack, maybe go 650, 700 out of the engine, which we all know that these engines can do. These engines are capable of making that power. They have the ability by just turning up, the boost pressure or increasing, the what's the word I'm looking for? Increasing the thing that Mercedes is being accused of. Can't remember
It's like the engine pressure, right, or something like
yeah,
that.
the
Yeah.
combustion pressure, increasing
Yeah.
those things, will increase the power of those engines and allow them to be able to then utilize the battery as what I think it's always should have been used for in Formula One, which is an added bonus. Something I thought was really interesting was the way that Leclerc was describing it as almost like having the mushroom in Mario Kart.
Yeah.
When they were battling between each other, they pretty much said that it's when you're going up against George Russell, or when he was going up against George Russell. I mean, it was fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. I love seeing them go back and forth. But when it's like, okay, it's automatic that it's going to be a pass. Okay, that's what's the difference between that and DRS last year? When it's automatic like that, that's what makes it kind of like a little bit sus, a little bit interesting. Now, when you get to the back half of the race, and we saw the way that Norris and Max were battling, then I think that there was a proper usage and that was the best version of the fighting that we want to see, because Max was right there on him. And if you compared that to the Leclerc versus uh, what's it, George Russell battle in the beginning of the race, where they were back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. As soon as anybody got within that 1 second range, they were getting the pass. Now at the end of the race, the kind of more comparable cars, I guess you could say, maybe a little bit slower cars, maybe a little bit not as advanced as the Ferrari and the Mercedes. Those guys were battling, and that was a good battle. Ended up Lando was able to stay ahead of Max and pulled away towards the very end. But that's the kind of stuff that we want to see. We don't just want to see passes because they can pass. We don't just want to see passes because it's automatic. We want to see battles. We want to see fights. We want to see these guys go toe to toe. We want to see the Liam Lawsons and the Sergio Perez's, wheel to wheel fighting each other in the back of the pack, because they're able to do that. The pass just because you're hitting a button, it's whatever to me. Give these cars more power. Let them use that as a strategy. Don't make it a necessity.
Yeah, I feel like some of this will just get worked out over time. Like, I know they're talking about potentially rushing out some new regulations. To me, that's not necessarily fair. The Mercedes got the jump on everyone, and like to try and, I know they're changing it under the guise of it'll make the racing a little bit better, but it's going to hurt Mercedes, obviously, and it's just, to me, that's not fair. And so I think you just got to live with it. And I think eventually they'll figure it out. Like, these drivers and teams figure it out. That's why as these cars evolve, they all become the same, essentially, because you figure out, oh, this is the most efficient way to do this. It's the most efficient way to do that. I think they'll figure out the best ways to deploy the battery so that I can overtake and then not get overtaken. And eventually this will like even out. Remember we were worried about that with with DRS too initially when they I know it was a long time ago when they initially rolled out. People were like, oh, you're just gonna pass on the straight, then on the next straight the other guy has if he passes back. And that never that happened initially some. It happened in Saudi Arabia right to the end because there was two long straights next to each other. But it eventually just became it's an aid for the car behind you to get lower drag because there's so much wake coming off the car in front. So I feel like eventually the drivers will figure this out. Um, I know they were talking about potentially rushing some stuff out to Suzuka in terms of regulation changes. To me, that's a little aggressive. They're already dealing with reliability issues, which was interesting to see because it's something that we had in recent years. So I think we'll see. I'm okay with them kind of riding this out a little bit and seeing what transpires before making some changes to the regulations. That especially when you're talking about how the power is delivered, that's a huge change. It's not
Yeah.
stuff they usually do in years. Like I can see that wing flexing, but it passes the test, so we're going to change how we test it, even though but not really necessarily the regulations. Whereas this is core of the car changes that they would have to that they would have to do to address this. And I think eventually they'll figure it out. The drivers will figure out like, okay, this is when I need to really deploy the battery. This is when I don't. And they'll figure out how to make it work so that the passing is a little bit more consistent. Like Nick says, shout out to my buddy Nick here. He used to host the show actually back in the day. One of the iterations of the show has gone through many, many, many iterations, but yeah, I think he's right. I think that's always the goal, right? That's what they always say. We need more passing. We need more passing. You got a lot of passing at the beginning of that race, and then it felt artificial. So now it's like too much passing. I don't know how they square that circle. It feels like they never can get it to everyone's pleasing, but that just might be the way it is.
Well, they want to go back to the glory days of the 70s, the 80s, even the late night or early 90s, where the cars were different. The cars were, everybody had a different type of engine, or they were all, some of them were V8, some of them were V6s, some of them were inline fours, and they were still able to battle with each other and have fights with each other, and you know it was very competitive. Now everybody has the same type of engine, the same style of engine. Everybody's got a turbocharger. Everybody's got a battery pack. Everybody's got a V6, and what's happening is that there's so much parity in Formula One that eventually, like you said, everybody's going to end up with the almost the exact same car by the end of this regulation. But the question is still going to be, can they battle with these cars? Can they fight with these cars? And I think that the answer is aerodynamically, yes. Aerodynamically, these cars seem to be a little bit better. Handling wise, they seem like they're a little bit better. You're hearing from drivers like Lewis that they're a little bit more lively. They're a little bit more agile. They're lighter feeling. I actually enjoyed seeing the active arrow. I think that the active arrow, in the race, in the implementation during the race, was very good. I like the fact that the front driver has it as well as the driver who's chasing, because again, they mentioned it during the commentary. Before it was that front driver has a big disadvantage because they didn't have their wing able to open up. Now DRS, or that active arrow, is not as strong as the DRS, because when that front driver has their wings open as well, the air isn't as turbulent. The air doesn't get
Yeah.
messed up as much. So he had, or the front driver has an ability to fight with them. I mean, honestly, I would love to see how these cars would be able to perform if it was just the engine power, if it was just a 500 horsepower you know race car with this active arrow. Get rid of the batteries, get rid of all that completely. That might be an interesting thing to see, just because of the fact that they are lighter, they are more agile, they're a little bit smaller. Obviously they're designed to run with the battery packs and everything, but you know my point about it is that give these cars a little bit more power. Let the engine the capabilities of the engine go a little bit further than what the battery does, because it's going to just help out everything else. It's going to allow them to push these cars. You want to see them push these cars. You don't want to
Yeah,
see
but I
them
don't know
get
these
upset.
cars. These cars can't operate. These are hybrids. Like the engine can't do that. Like that's it's not going to work. They're going to have to
Well,
put so much fuel in those too. Like they won't even fit in the fuel
no,
tank.
for
Like none of
for
that's going to.
sure, for sure.
Like they're
I'm
not
just
designed that. We're just gonna have to look.
I'm
Unfortunately, we're
just
gonna have to eat
spitballing
it.
that.
Like I don't,
I'm
I
not saying
don't,
that
I
they're
don't
going to do it.
see. No, I know, but like I don't think there's any. These cars take so long to develop and design. I will say I do think it's telling that Mercedes is obviously fine with this. Ferrari is fine with it for the most part. Like Leclerc was not negative and Hamilton was positive, like you said.
Yeah,
And the two teams complain the most are McLaren and Red Bull because they're clearly behind. And I think,
yeah,
you know, yeah, of course they would like to have last year's spec back, right? I mean,
yeah,
they were better at it, so I think everyone will figure it out. As we've mentioned multiple times, that previous generation of cars started with Lando Norris
yeah,
in the pit on every lap to get topped off on fluids, and ended with McLaren winning back-to-back constructors championships and being the dominant car. So I do think there's a lot of room for McLaren to grow here,
yeah,
just because they just got the actual engine. Like I said earlier, there's pretty good technical breakdown evidence on Mercedes' big advantage being just the efficiency with which they're able to charge their batteries, and it's really the engine mapping and the tuning of the car that does that. Well, McLaren now has a race of data to kind of look into that, and get better at that, because it is the same engine.
yeah,
So theoretically, it's the same engine. It should be more competitive than it was. So
yeah,
we'll see how that plays out. But I don't think it's fair to make any big changes in the middle of the season. I know they're talking about doing that. I think you've got to live with it. And just I think these teams are these are like the smartest people. I know we make fun of some of the strategy and stuff sometimes. These are the smartest engineers on earth. Like they'll figure it out. They'll make it. They just need data. And now they get data. Like if this was back in the day where they had unlimited practice and test sessions, all these cars would be a lot more fine tuned than they are now. They're just,
yeah,
they have those few like track days and that's it. They used to test all winter and come in with a car where they had a lot more data on it. So they'll figure it out. And I think this will get even more interesting as the season progresses. So I'm less worried about it than most people, because I mean, we've been here before.
yeah,
Oh no, we're all screwed. They've screwed up I mean, if you go back and watch a race like from 12, 13 years ago when they had the curve system and you see all the graphics and it's being like, oh my god, I can't believe we watched Formula One like that. And then it's like, now you have all these other stuff. Oh, the overtake lights on and all this crap. And it's just like, you gotta, I think once we get used to it, it's fine. Until you're used to it, it's all feels weird. So I think it'll be okay.
yeah. I mean, I just feel like give them a little bit of increase of power, on the IC, run that, see if that helps out, and if it does, okay, cool. And that's an easy, to me, that's an easy, simple solution to the problem. Just give them a little bit more power, an extra 150 horsepower, an extra 75 horsepower, whatever it may be. Just give it that little extra percentage to where they're not having to slow down as much on the straights, to where they're able to push the cars. And that to me is, it's a simple solution to what the problem is that we all saw this past weekend. And the problem that we all saw, like we said, is managing the cars, not racing the cars. We want them to be racing the cars. If you're managing the car, it's not the same thing. Racing should be driving as fast as you can to beat the guy in front of you, or driving as hard as you can to stop the guy from getting past you.
Yeah, but
And
managing the car has always been part of that. And it's just an iteration of that, isn't it?
but managing in the sense of what, not stamping on the brakes to lock up your tires, not
Well, I mean, we
paying
had this
attention.
discussion, I mean, I feel like we've been having flavors of this discussion for a long time, because when they went to the Pirelli tires, remember the Bridgestones by the end, where you could run the softest tire for the entire race without much performance drop off which is why they had. It's funny because they don't even really need the mandatory pit stop rule anymore because no one in their right mind would try to drive one set of tires for the entire race. The reason they brought that in is because you could actually drive the Bridgestones, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is crap. Now you can't push on every lap." That's what they used to do because the tires wouldn't go. You'd be flat every lap. You'd drive as hard as you can. You weren't conserving anything except for maybe fuel. But that's only when they brought, when they stopped refueling after Singapore when we had the whole fire on Moss's car, and they're like, okay, we can't refuel anymore. Before that, everything was flat out all the time. Then they're like, oh, they're taking away your refueling. Now you have to manage fuel. That's BS. You have to manage the tires. Shred them. That doesn't work. I feel like it's just another thing in that. You got to figure out how to manage your battery correctly. And I think the way that they're doing it right now is probably not the optimal way. Everyone is it really lifting in the middle of the straight? Probably not. I don't see George Russell doing a lot of that. So I think their car is just better, so they're less impacted by this. I think the other teams will figure it out. But that said, let's go through some of these sessions. So qualifying, I guess we should back up a second. FP3 towards the end, Antonelli had a huge crash, destroyed his car. Didn't look like he was going to make it to qualifying, but then our man Max Verstappen did him a huge favor by throwing it at the wall. Red flag the session, which in Q1 bought Antonelli and Mercedes just enough time to get the car back out on track. They would not have made it, but there was a 7-minute, I believe, gap while they got Max's car out of there and repaired the barriers. That was just enough time for him to join the queue as they waited for the session to restart. So he got out there and was able to qualify. And ended up, the Mercedes was so dominant. It was a 1-2, even though they didn't really get to set the car up for anything, which is crazy. But I guess how surprised were you that Max basically lost it immediately in qualifying?
I mean, it was extremely surprising. I was watching it, at work on my phone. Maybe I shouldn't have been on my phone at work, but I was. I told all the other managers, I'm sorry, it's Formula One. It's the first weekend. I'm going to be watching my phone and watching this race. So anyways, sitting there, I saw it happen, and I just freaked out because I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of the one thing that we're gonna look back at and say, okay, is this one of the reasons why these cars didn't work? That everything that they were talking about was it Max that made a mistake? He's the best driver in the world. It cannot be Max that made this mistake. I'm sure Carly's going to make a comment about that he is the greatest driver, and there's no way it was his fault. Or was it the car? They said, okay, maybe he was selected a downshift, and the downshift, didn't kick in until the last second, and then it locked the tires. I mean, there's so many different things that can go on. It was so surprising. It was one of those situations that you never see happening, and you never expect something like that to happen, especially from, what is he now, a 4-time world champion, 3-time world champion, something like that?
Depends on if you count 2021.
Yeah, something like that, I guess you could say. He's a multiple time
count the stolen tile.
One of the greatest, he's going to be probably named as one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time. And, he bins it turn 1 going into his push lap. It's just, it's not something you expect to happen. And it helped out Mercedes, and it made for an interesting race. At the later part of the race.
It really helped out Mercedes because obviously Antonelli ends up qualifying and finishing second. And actually, it would have been interesting to see him try to charge from 22nd, essentially. It's where he would have had to start all the way in the back, having not taken part in qualifying. It would have been interesting to see him try to charge all the way through the field because he probably had if Max caught up to Lando, you got to figure that the worst Antonelli would have done, he would have definitely gotten past those two and maybe threatened the Ferraris. I don't know. So it would have been interesting to see. But like you said, that was very consequential, that crash, because in addition to having Max starting 20th, it did open up the opportunity for Antonelli to actually take part in qualifying. I will say this: these are very different cars, which goes without saying. But the driving style to adjust to them is very different too. And we were just talking about, the battery charging and all that. It's just they're narrower. They handle different.
Yeah.
And I think he just lost it. He's not used to it. He pushed too much in the wrong spot and he lost it. And that's going to happen. I remember, again, dating myself a little bit, but when they went to the Pirelli tires, if you recall, this was when Lewis Hamilton was still in the McLaren, and he was known as like the rough around the edges guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was the quickest guy, but he was crazy and he was over the limit too much, and all that stuff. And everyone's like, "Well, he's dead now. He can't manage tires." Of course, 6 championships later or whatever, I think he can manage tires. And this is Max is gonna have to adjust his driving style a little bit. He's been complaining all winter, all the press is about, oh no, we have to do this. You can't complain, but you just gotta adjust to it. And he's obviously, super talented and should be able to do that. But it is an adjustment. And you can't just, he was, even last year's Red Bull, where obviously McLaren was a better car, it was built to his driving style. Yeah. He's never had to like kind of adjust to cars that don't suit the way he likes to drive them. And this generation of cars is not, I don't think, the way anyone likes to drive them. So they're all going to have to make adjustments. If he's going to struggle to do that, you're going to see stuff like this. He's obviously not the only one that lost it in a session. In fact, on a formation lap, which we're going to talk about, I think, in a second. But
not even the
formation lap. So the qualifying, after that was kind of went the way we thought it was. The Mercedes were dominant. Ferrari is kind of behind them.
Well,
go ahead.
Isaac Hadjar.
Yeah, well, he got up there with the Red Bull because, again, I don't think we necessarily thought the Red Bulls were bad.
Yeah,
right. I think we thought Mercedes and Ferrari are in front, and then it's Red Bull and McLaren behind them. But Hadjar did a great job on qualifying.
Hadjar, I mean, that came out of nowhere. Nobody even as soon as Max was out of it, everybody was like, "Okay, it's Mercedes, it's Ferrari." I'm thinking to myself all that, and then Hadjar just came out with a lap, and I'm like, "All right, cool, you showed up. You want to make up for last year, and the horrible situation that happened to you last year, and." I mean,
yeah,
we'll talk about the race,
put it in third, yeah.
But I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, and then let's talk about the race. So first thing before the race, talk about bidding it. This is even worse than what Max did. Oscar.
Worse than Hadjar last year too.
Yeah, he crashed going to the grid. I mean, at least last year it was raining. Like I don't know what
exactly that's my point.
Excuse was. But it's just the lap to go make the grid. Turn 4, I guess, ran and just completely. I don't know what was going on. Was he not paying attention? Like, what was that? That shouldn't.
They said he was warming up the tires and he had more energy on tap than he expected. And when he got on it like launched him pretty much. Well, I'm thinking he hit a wrong button or something on the steering wheel.
It had to have been, right? He had to have done something completely idiotic.
Because
I mean, look,
he hit the overtake button while he was weaving or something like that.
Something must have happened, right? Because like for a normal road car, even those like reconnaissance laps and stuff are like way faster than you'd ever drive. But for them, this is barely even moving. Mm-hmm. Like you said, to go into the wall that hard, he had to have screwed something. Like it's not just, oh, I lost it. He didn't brush the wall. I mean, he slammed into that thing like that.
Slammed.
That car disintegrated basically. And I know, and there has to have been, like, yes, we've seen drivers make mistakes. Going to the grid under safety car. We've seen these things in the past. It does happen, but it's generally some kind of, occasionally they lose it and tap the wall, but to slam into it, it's got to be some kind of, mistake beyond just losing the car. It's got to be like you said, hit a wrong button, deployed the energy incorrectly, and it just took off on him. Like that's the only thing. So he now left a nice little gap there on the grid because, as you're well aware of it, when someone doesn't make the grid, they just leave. Everyone doesn't move up. They just leave a gap there. And so I guess as the race starts, as the race starts, there have been rumors, and it showed up a little bit in testing that Ferrari had figured out a way to kind of kill it off the start, and they did just that.
Before even that, though, can we talk about the craziness of the lights even going out? Like that was the weirdest light situation I'd ever seen. I mean, for it to go count down the lights 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Like the last light
Yeah, no, it
visited
didn't pause at all.
at all. And usually we see, it goes to 5 and then it shuts off like a
Well,
hundredth of a second,
apparently, I
couple
guess there was a
hundredths.
slight rule change I wasn't aware of that it's exactly 5 seconds for the light
Yeah.
thing now, where before it was again it's dating myself back in the day, there used to be like a radio signal that would tell it when to go,
Hmm.
and some of the teams figured out the timing on it. And so they cheated and they intentionally held it like half the field, like rolled forward and started
Hmm.
going. And so after that, they vary it. That's why I always see it, like you said, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on the fifth light coming on, it pauses for a random amount of time versus all the other ones are in sequence.
Yeah.
And that way you can't get an advantage. To your point, it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 off like immediately, and then yeah, I think it did catch some people out because
Oh, it caught
actually
almost the
the
whole
Ferraris
field
didn't
out.
get the best like initial jump. It was the second stage where they just kind of, especially Leclerc, just jetted past. And yeah, and then also Lindblad got a fantastic start as well.
Yes, he did.
Those were notables. Antonelli dropped back to I think sixth or seventh.
7th. So he
What's
dropped
up,
back.
Brian?
He
Yeah,
dropped back
so
even behind Lando.
yeah, and then just slowly started using his superior equipment to just move the field. So
Picking everybody off.
yeah, so that then got to that first stage where I think this is where you kind of saw too that actually like Leclerc was kind of holding the field up because he and Russell kind of passed each other back and forth. We already talked a lot about that, so we need to redo it. But then Hamilton gets up, catches up to them, and then you see Antonelli like pulling chunks out of their laptop. Like these guys are just going slow because they don't know how to pass correctly yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then eventually, you alluded to this earlier, our man Hadjar, who was having a great race, engine let go.
Which was
He
so
pulled
sad.
over. Yeah.
That was so disappointing. Just because he wanted to make up for last year, and he got up to
And he was
30
doing
laps
it
of
too. He
qualifying,
was doing it too.
and he was up there with them. I mean, it would have been a great fight to see him and Kimi Antonelli go at it with each other for a bunch of laps and stuff like that. But it just that engine let go real fast. We thought the Aston Martin's engine was going to let go quick. That thing let go quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yeah, no, it let go. He pulled over, obviously, into a place where you thought, okay, they can get the car out there quick. So they went VSC. Unfortunately, the car was smoking, so the marshals didn't want to touch it until they could kind of cool it down. So it sat there for a bit, which, there were 3 laps, I believe, under VSC, which was a lot for a VSC. So immediately the Mercedes pitted. Ferraris went around a couple of times. Did not pit.
Ruined their
Obviously,
whole race.
Hamilton said at least one of us should have pitted as the VSC was ending. What are your thoughts on that strategy, Cole?
I mean, we see it was the wrong one.
Morgan
With hindsight,
strategy.
with hindsight, you see it was obviously the wrong choice. I think it was pretty telling though to see that Lewis called it out during the race. I'm sorry if you're at that point to where you're calling it out, Lewis, just pull in. They'll react to you. They will.
You
They
can't
will.
do that because they're not ready.
100%. They have enough time to react to him pulling in like that. They have enough time. The guys are out on are essentially. I'm not gonna say out on the wall, ready to go, but by the time he turns in, if he just makes that decision and says "F it," I'm coming in no matter what. They're gonna be ready for him by the time he pulls in. And if they're not, they're then they lose another half second or second or whatever.
No, they're gonna come out of the pits. They have the tires ready. Like there's a science to that. You can't just. I heard the broadcaster criticize that as well.
Or at least tell them I'm gonna come in this lap. I don't care what you guys are telling me.
It's a team.
It is,
it's a team decision.
But if you know that it was the wrong decision, and you're a what is he? He's a 7-time world champion.
Should be eight.
Should be 8. You can make that decision. You have been brought to this team to make them better. How else are you going to make them better except showing them that their strategies are crap? That's
But here's the
what
thing.
happened.
So here, let me counter that. So I don't think it's on a driver to unilaterally say, "I'm coming in, come hell or high water. You guys be ready." To me, that's undermining your team. It's the first race. To me, they're on the pit wall. That's their job. You can provide input. They need to allow the team to make decisions. I get it. He's Lewis Hamilton. He can do whatever. He's sure Lewis Hamilton can do whatever he wants to a certain extent. But like to me, it would undermine the entire team if you're like, I think you guys are all wrong. I'm pitting. And I don't think it mattered at all. They ended up with 15 seconds behind Russell. That car was more than 15 seconds worse. I mean, they needed something to go their way to win. I think they knew it even at the time. Yeah, Russell was, behind Leclerc and in front of Hamilton. But they needed something. Those Mercedes were way faster. They needed something to break their way. And I think they were thinking, hey, we can get a tire offset.
Yeah.
So and I don't think there was any way that they were gonna finish in front of the Mercedes. Like that car was too fast. The other thing is we don't know what Mercedes was doing. They might have done box opposite, and if Ferrari jumped in, then Mercedes gets out in front with the clear track and pulls away and pits. It comes out in front because that's all Mercedes needed was the clear air, and this thing was done. So the only thing, like I said earlier, you could clearly see that as the field spread didn't really happen because Leclerc was holding everyone up. Once Mercedes got in the clear air, immediately it was like Antonelli fastest lap, and Russell fastest lap, and just over and over and over again. Even after the Ferraris pitted for fresh rubber, it didn't matter. The Mercedes in clean air was not really touchable. So I don't know that it necessarily mattered. And then the other thing is they just got bad luck with when I think it was it Bottas's Cadillac.
Yeah.
They had just got past the pit straights because otherwise they could have pitted under that VSC.
Yeah. And
But
that VSC was
they
like
closed it.
half a lap.
Well, no, it was enough time to come in and pit. Some cars behind them were able to do that, but in the middle of that, they closed the pit lane to roll Bottas. Like when they came back around, the pit lane wasn't open anymore.
Yeah.
And so again, that was just bad luck. But the other thing is, again, like if we look at good time to pivot to. Let's look at the race results. I mean, I don't think there's any stretching your way out of this. I mean, Antonelli ended up closing the gap to 3 seconds. That the Mercedes was in a class of its own, and
it was
all they needed was just clean air. So if both Ferraris had pitted, the Mercedes would have just stayed out and run away with it. And then when they pitted, they would have come out. So I think their hope was to get to pit under another safety car VSC, which was not. Again, it was bad luck that Bottas broke at the pit entrance and not anywhere else on circuit, or that would have actually worked. But they needed some kind of a different strategy and a tire offset. They could not mirror Mercedes' strategy. Yeah. They would not have won doing that. And so I get it. I get just like we got to do something different. Even though Leclerc was in front, I don't think at any point, let me ask you this question, Evan. At any point, did you think Leclerc was going to win? I didn't.
Maybe in the beginning of the race when he took off and they were going back and forth. I thought at that point there might have been a chance. Were they holding back? Were they sandbagging? Were they not showing their true potential? I thought at that point there was a possibility that Leclerc could take off because remember at that point Lewis was up there with him too, and Lewis was hunting down George Russell, and they were right behind.
A lot of that was that's a good point. At the time, you didn't realize it. Then you started looking at the rest of the field. It's also close, and you're like, oh, Leclerc just going slow.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's a good point. There was a point there where it's like, hey, maybe the Ferraris have good race pace, which they did, but not nearly what Mercedes had. So after that, it was pretty. There were pieces falling off the Cadillac. The Aston Martins retired, of course, because that's what they do. But like. Nothing else. Anything else stand out to you before we kind of go through the look at the overall standings and all that?
Well, I just want to see what your feeling is on the best of the rest after week one, because I mean, realistically, we have a plethora of teams that are all right there. You got Haas, Racing Bulls, and Audi and Alpine, all right there to round out the top 10. After basically the two fastest teams in Mercedes and Ferrari, two really fast drivers in McLaren and or Norris and Verstappen, Bierman, Lindblad, Bortoleto, and Gasly rounding out those last four spots in the top 10 really shows me that there really is kind of a good competition, at least with those four, maybe five teams. If you want to throw, Williams in there, if they can get their act together, how do you feel like that is shaping out? How do you feel like that could work its way through the season after week one?
Yeah, it's actually so coming in there, I thought Alpine was going to be better than they showed here.
Yeah,
So to me, the scales are tipping more towards Haas at this point as the non-Big Four. I think the Williams is done for this year. It's how
yeah,
do you
it's
come with
heavy.
the
It's
yeah?
heavy.
How do you come up with a car like that? Like it's so hard to drop weight then, and
Yeah,
like so. I think this year there's going to be a struggle for them. So I think it's really I think it's between Alpine and Haas at this point. I mean, Bortoleto
that
did
Audi
an
man.
incredible job. Did an incredible job to get there. The other Audi didn't even start the race.
Yeah,
So like there's just I think there are going to be some teething problems there. The Haas team is I think just consistent, and so I think I like them to kind of be that next team after the Big Four. But we'll see. It's a lot of racing yet to come. What about you?
I mean, I was extremely impressed by Lindblad early in the race. Him and Bierman had a pretty good fight there. I think it's pretty telling to see that right up to that point was where the lap down, kind of started. That Russell got past all of them, and was able to put them all
Yeah,
laying
I think
down.
he lapped everyone but the top
Yeah,
the top teams.
exactly.
Essentially.
So I thought that was pretty interesting, and might make for, like we said, a good best of the rest, battle for this year if that's how the year ends up being for
Yeah, and
this
I
year.
think we touched on this earlier. The whole thing that we got used to, really, that seems to at least initially not be the case. Is these cars are so reliable that
Yeah.
you wouldn't have all these like again, two do not starts. One of them was of
Hmm.
course Piastri's wrecking, but then in addition to the DNFs, there's a bunch of cars that like were laps down because they had to go. They were just running extra laps after basically they would have retired the car in a normal situation when they
Yeah.
want the data. Like that reliability thing, especially at the bottom of the field, could have a huge impact on the championship. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
And really also to see that these young drivers are coming out there and doing very well. I like seeing Bierman and Limblad and Bortoleto up there in the top 10, fighting. It would be one thing to see Hulkenberg and Gasly and Ocon up there, and Lawson, because even though Lawson's still kind of young, but to see those guys who are the technically the lead drivers of their teams, being that they're the veteran drivers, but to see these young guys come out here and perform like they did, I mean, it's very encouraging, not just for them and for the midfield battle this year, but for Formula One in general moving forward. Because we're not always going to have Hamilton and Verstappen and Leclerc and all these guys in Formula One. They're not going to be here forever. So, even though Alonso probably will be racing in Formula One until he's in a wheelchair, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
he was surprisingly positive given that the car is a disaster. So
yeah.
we'll see. Do you have a driver of the day?
I'm gonna go with Antonelli. Russell, we kind of expected that he was gonna pull away and be far ahead of everywhere else. Antonelli had that bad start that we talked about, but still kind of worked his way up through. Was fighting with Hamilton, with Leclerc, made some really really great overtakes. Was very aggressive, and the struggles that he went through coming out of or going into qualifying, being that he wrecked literally what, an hour before qualifying started, 2 hours before qualifying started, something like that.
Yes.
The team the team getting him out there like that, and then for him to be able to get in that car and do what he did to get that car into Q3, and then not only that, but to then be as fast as he was during the race with a car that was repaired as much as it was. Yeah, I thought he deserved the driver of the day. I thought that he did a very good job, and he showed that. Man, I don't think he's gonna back down to Georgia if there's an situation where they start running up against each other. I think he wants to come out for that championship just as much as George does.
Speaking of Georgia, he's my driver of the day. I thought it would have been so. There's a lot of pressure on him. He's the favorite to win the title coming in. He stuck it on pole, immediately blew that, or Leclerc took it, however you want to categorize it. But he was patient, allowed the car to do the work. It's not easy to do that when again, it's very easy now to look back on the race and see that Leclerc is holding him up. He obviously feels it. It can get frustrating there. Past George Russell might have, gone for a torpedo move or something to try and I can't be back here. Instead, he was patient with it. They overtook in the pits, and he saw it out, managed well. So he's my driver of the day. In terms of disappointment, I'll throw mine out there, and you might equal it. It's probably the same one. Oscar Piastri's got to make the grid at least. Come on, man.
100%.
Your home race, you're driving a McLaren, 2-time defending constructor champions, and you bit it in the wall on a reconnaissance lap to the grid. Oh man, that is definitely the disappointment. So in terms of what that did to the standings, so obviously the drivers just mirrors the results from Australia, and then the constructors. Yeah, that point total for McLaren took a big hit, and Oscar didn't get any. So they are, and then obviously since Hadjar blew up as well, the McLaren Red Bull third and fourth is just Norris and Max, but and Mercedes already opened up a little lead here. We'll see.
Definitely.
We'll see how this plays out. Now, of course, the Formula One calendar the way it is. There's a race this week. Again, that is China. So I guess we'll let's stop sharing this, and we will get Evan to take us through a lap of China.
Toward turn one of the most unusual openings in Formula One. Hard on the brakes, now turning in, and the corner just keeps tightening. The driver balancing the throttle beautifully through the long right-hand spiral, careful not to scrub those front tyres too much. Now into turn two, still tightening. Now finally flicking left for turn three and powering out toward turn four. Short burst of acceleration before the braking zone for turns 5 and 6. A quick right, then heavy braking for the tighter left. Clips the apex nicely and gets back on the power without lighting up the rear tyres. Through the fast turns 7 and 8 now, left then right at high speed. Onto turns 9 and 10, a more technical sequence. Precision needed here, neat and tidy through the apexes to keep the momentum flowing. Now the long right-hander of turns 11, 12 and 13, gradually squeezing on the throttle, waiting. The steering unwinds and now the power comes down. Onto that enormous back straight, one of the longest in Formula One. The speed climbing past 330 kilometers per hour as the car rockets toward the hairpin. Huge braking moment for turn 14 from top speed right down to second gear. Huge braking moment for turn 14 from top speed right down to second gear. Now accelerating out through turn 15, a quick flick left into turn 16, and the driver gets back on the power as early as possible, across the line.
Yeah, so Evan, this track is famously, as I pull up the circuit, is famously shaped like a dragon of sorts. What are your thoughts on China, and then, obviously with this new generation of cars, how do you think that's gonna play out here?
I thought it was shaped like the Chinese letter for Shanghai.
I thought it was a dragon. Is it the Chinese letter for Shanghai? I don't know. It's shaped like something.
Nah, I think that's what it is. It's the Chinese letter. Like if you look at the actual Chinese symbol for Shanghai, that's what it's supposed to be shaped after, if I'm not mistaken. But I think it's a good track. I think it's a fun track. It's got that really long straight down the back. That's gonna be the most interesting thing that we see, during this race is how they manage that battery going down that back straight. The slow speed sections like right there into to turn one, and also turns 11, 12, and 13. They're kind of interesting to me that there's always a good pile up of cars, especially going into turn one right in the beginning of the race. There's always excitement because it really is just a long, almost 360-degree turn that they're doing there. You see they come in and they go almost all the way around before they then cut back to the left. So it's off camber. It's a little bit banked here and there, like if it's raining, it gets really interesting seeing them go through that part. And then there's a lot of like high speed flowing parts, like they talked about in the video, where the cars can really stretch their legs. But again, just like we talked about with Albert Park, there's not really that many opportunities for those big braking zones. Going into 14, you have a big braking zone. Maybe going into turn 11, you have a really big braking zone. But it's going to be interesting to see how these cars play out, with the regen, with the battery powered, you know, that basically that run after they get out of 14 all the way till they get to turn one. These cars are almost flat out. We saw how they, a couple years back, how some of those cars, skidded out off the road at turn, 16, right before the start finish line. There was track warnings there. There was, loss of times on some of the laps that some of the drivers had because they were going over, because they pretty much take that turn, almost completely flat. Even that with a turn in there is gonna wear down that battery really, really hard. So not only do you have the straight between turns 13 and 14, but then between 14 and turn one, that's gonna be another situation where you're gonna see these guys having to slow down before going into turn one, after or during the race, or even, I would say during qualifying laps. During qualifying laps, they'll bank up as much power going into turn one as possible. But it's gonna be an interesting situation. It's gonna be interesting to see how these cars handle these. Where are the active aero spots? I can't see it on the
They
screen.
didn't mark them on this map, so I'm assuming it's, and this is the official FIA map, but they did not mark them. I was looking. I'm assuming it's the sector 3 straight, and then also the start finish straight would be the
Vish, hold up.
maybe a little one here.
Hold up. We gotta mention something. Mom just got in the chat. Put her up on the screen, please. Happy birthday, Mom. Today's her birthday.
Oh yes, very very good. Happy birthday to Evan's mother, fan of the show too. So
Yep.
happy birthday to her.
We had a nice birthday lunch with
Nice.
me, my sister, my aunt, and my wife, and my mom. We all went out to the old stomping grounds at Ale House and had a nice lunch. And just wanted to mention happy birthday to her in on the show. So it's all here. I was the first person to tell her happy birthday last night at 2 a.m. I texted her, and now it's on.
Hopefully you didn't wake her up.
No. She definitely slept through that. She read it when she woke up, but I wanted to be on the internet on screen that I'm saying happy birthday to her.
You most definitely are. So I've zoomed in, but unfortunately there's still not any kind. There's a little tick mark here that's very faded. That might be. I think that's just telling you what direction the track is going in. I don't see that marked on this map, the official FIA map.
So that's gonna be interesting to see.
I'm pretty sure it's this straight and maybe this one. This is the one I'm questioning. These two definitely.
I mean, it is going to be pretty interesting to see how it works out, because even that 8 and 9, or 7, 8, and 9, spot there, how much downforce do they really need to get through those, long sweepers. Are they gonna let them have the active arrow open there, or is it just primarily for when they're going completely straight? It's gonna
No,
be
I think it's
interesting to
just
see.
completely straight. I mean, based
Okay.
on what they did in Australia, anything with even a slight curve, they were kind of
Well, I
timing
mean,
out. Remember, they tried to get rid of it between turns 8 and 9, then backed off of that when they got into a little bit of an issue because people were like, well, that's where we use it because it helps us charge our batteries or whatever. And so it ended up being they weren't sure what to do with it. But yeah, interesting they didn't mark it on this map. The other thing I'm interested to see is, as you mentioned, especially into this turn 1, it's off camber, so the cars tend to like. There's a lot of different lines you can take through there
mhm.
because it's not always an off camber, but then it's a switchback. So um, the narrower cars, I wonder how aggressive everyone's going to get because you can squeeze a lot more cars in there now than you used to be able to. So
Four wide.
yeah,
You're
see
gonna
how
see
wide
four wide cars.
see how wide everyone gets there. I will say there's another note here we're going to get to a second, but first the tires. They've gone for the middle set C2, C3, C4. We will see how that works. I feel like they're being conservative. Again, this is a new generation of tires too,
Yeah.
so they've been a little bit conservative with their choices. So picking the middle set is always always an option. But the other thing that's happening here is this is a sprint race weekend, so right back into it for that. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, not a lot of practice time, just the one practice, and then sprint qualifying. But what they will get in advance of the race is actually the opportunity to see the cars run in race conditions, and then come back maybe in the actual race and figure out what worked, what didn't work for deploying the battery and make adjustments. So I'll be interested to see if we see any big pace deltas for teams between how they operate the sprint versus the actual race once they get that data back and realize, hey, we were really inefficient doing this. Don't deploy the battery here, deploy it there instead. And they're all obviously spying on each other legally, not like McLaren did with the copy machine and idiot took it to Kinko's.
Yeah.
But not like that. But they all we also get access to this too, right? On boards and all that. They can see when the other teams are deploying the batteries and all that. So they'll obviously pour over all that data and realize, hey, Mercedes is doing this with their battery. They're going a lot faster than us. We should do that similar. So I'm interested to see the sprint versus the race and how that plays out in terms of if there are adjustments made and changes made to the approach.
Yeah, I mean, I just expect it to be a little bit more competitive this week, just because it's another week of the knowledge. It's another week of the data. It's another week of them having the same spec engine as the mothership teams. So
And it's also again, hopefully that they're already starting to work out the reliability issues. So opportunities there, but again, the timing's not great for us. 11:30 on Thursday, technically into Friday morning, qualifying for the sprint race 3:30 a.m. on Friday. And then at 11 p.m. on Friday, it's the sprint race. Technically, those are on the same day, even though obviously in China there's the overnight in the middle. Qualifying 3 a.m. technically Saturday morning, and the race 3 a.m. on Sunday. You mentioned weather has been an issue in China in the past. So far, for the weekend, it's looking okay. Not a lot of rain chance. You can see around, like really start with Monday and certainly into next week is what we typically see around China this time of year. So they caught a little bit of a break in terms of dry conditions. And frankly, at this point in this car evolution, I'd rather them run in dry. The sooner they get more data and develop these cars, the better the racing we get. So, screwing around in a wet race or potentially getting a red flag if they have to actually use the wet tires, like I don't need that. I already do. So, all right. So that sets us up for a fun weekend in China. Before we go to our friends that do the predictions, are there any teams or in particular or any kind of driver you're looking at to see how they respond this week?
Piastri. McLaren. You know, I did Piastri won this race last year. He was pretty dominant. He, you know, got pole position. He looked great. If I'm not, you know, if I'm remembering it correctly, he didn't he lead wire to wire pretty much, and Lando was like right there with him at the end, but he pretty much took him. Or something happened with Lando at the very. Oh, this was the one that Lando had the issue. Oh, he had a tire issue or something like that, right? There was an issue that he had with the car. But either way, um, I want to see how Piastri responds. Piastri needs to come out and you know at least do something against you know his teammate. Maybe beat a Red Bull or you know be competitive because how are you somebody that is considered a championship contender, you know, somebody who you know was you know touted as being the next best driver for McLaren, and then you come out and bid it on not even the warm up lap, not even the formation lap, but the lap to get you guys out to the grid from the pits,
Yeah.
you know, and not even that, but at your home race, at your home Grand Prix. You know, so I want to see how he comes out in response to it. I want to see how Ferrari comes out in response to, you know, to Mercedes and you know, see how they can if they can improve enough to be able to battle up against you know Mercedes a little bit more than just for the first you know quarter of the race or you know three or third of the race whatever it may be because you know they did have this sprint win last year here so you know that's gonna those are really the teams and the drivers I'm looking at how about you what are you thinking about.
Yeah, I'm from a driver standpoint, I'm looking at Antonelli to see if he can actually compete with George Russell. He was pretty clearly the number two driver this week.
Yeah.
A few more races of that, and it's just going to be George Russell's coronation within that team. Mercedes famously does not, favor a driver, but these things eventually work themselves out. Like they never, and Rosberg and Hamilton will show you. They'll let you fight it out. So they're not going to, be like, all right, Kimi, you're the number two driver. But if it naturally occurs that way, which after one weekend is what it's looking like. So
Yeah.
curious to see how he does there. And then in terms of a team, Ferrari, I'm curious. Like you said, I thought they did well. I know people criticize structure. I just don't think there's any way they're fast enough to beat Mercedes. With that said, this is the last race was the first time that Lewis and Charles were really close together. I know there were some scraps last year, but I think it was pretty clearly, most weekends Charles was quicker.
Yeah.
This one was a little bit more mixed. I know Charles ended up in front, but it was less than a second at the end, and obviously, like no one's gonna like bend their car in the first race trying to do like a last second overtake. So I'm curious if Hamilton can get in front of him and actually like kind of put his stake in the claim. It's like, hey, this is my team because it still feels like he's driving someone else's car.
Yeah.
And so be curious to see how that goes. So that is the driver I'm watching. All right, we got Morgan's predictions earlier. He's got George. Let me write this down. He's got George. Big shock there. And then Leclerc and Hamilton, and then he is going Max DNF, which is just thinking like Harley, but anyway.
Yeah, his aunt isn't going to be too happy with him.
Yeah.
On that one.
All right, so what do you got for me?
I'm going to go George 1, Lewis 2, Antonelli 3.
Okay.
My surprise pick is I'm going to go with Hajar ahead of Max.
So
I'm gonna go.
I wrote this down like Okay, sorry, I'm laughing because I wrote this down an hour ago. I will show this to you on screen if you want. But my top three was Russell, Hamilton, Antonelli. And I make sure I write down before the show now because I don't want to like get influenced by what you say. So I write down like way before the show. And it's been sitting there, and then you just said the same thing. And then my surprise was sort of half of work. Actually, it involves both of yours because I went up a level and said double Red Bull DNF,
Oh
not
wow.
just Max. And you got Hadjar finishing ahead of Max, which, by the way, is possible with my prediction if he DNFs after Max does. That'll count. So we can both win this thing.
It does. And Carly seems to be agreeing with all of our
Yeah, of
surprise
course.
picks.
Why would you have any issues with anything we said? Um, I mean, you gave the most positive Max prediction, which was that he finishes, but behind that. Carly with the least surprising pick off the board here. Max in all three spots, and yeah, that would be a surprise.
That would.
If they rehire Michael Massey, it is possible. But
no, Mikey.
Anyway, so was Morgan apparently. So we're all down on Max this weekend. Carly obviously is not. Anyway, so that race again over this weekend practice Thursday night, technically 11:30 p.m. into Friday early morning. Sprint qualifying Friday morning at 3:30 in the morning. The sprint race 11 p.m. on Friday. Qualifying 3 a.m. on Saturday, and the race 3 a.m. on Sunday. Your father's also throwing his hat in the ring for Max. I just know Red Bull is not there. I don't think it has the pace, and I don't think it fits his driving style. That's double whammy for him. Anyway, we'll see. So there's actually one of those. Actually, we should probably talk about this a little bit, right? There's a week off after this race to go to Japan. Mm-hmm. The next two races after that were Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, which are very much in doubt at this point. So we'll see. But as of right now, the next there's a week off, and then Japan. That should go off fine. But then there's a couple of weeks before Bahrain, and then immediately the week after that was supposed to be Saudi Arabia. We will see how that transpires because right now, again, obviously, unless you're moving under a rock, there's issues in that part of the world. So we'll see if those transpire, and that's what they're saying. They might use that potentially pretty long break that we used to be normal in F1, but just not happening anymore at all. To potentially mess with some of the regulations because it gives teams time to work on it. But we will see. We'll probably have more on that next week as well, and we'll be back to wrap up and talk about China, and then the week after that we'll probably review Japan. But Evan, let's hope our McLarens could pull a miracle, or at the very least, both of you start the race. I don't even say finish. Finish is a bridge too far. At least start the race. Get to the grid. Take the lights. Take the green flag to start the race. Let's see if we can get that done this week.
If I may, I want to say one more thing.
Of course.
The most frustrating part of this whole weekend was by far, the fact that this was all on Apple TV. Okay. I'm sorry. I never in my life thought that I wouldn't be able to watch Formula One on some TV somewhere. I work in a business that is predicated on 24 hours all day, the entire time that my business is opened up, having sports on TV, and there's no way for us to watch Formula One on any of them. That is terrible. I'm sorry.
I mean, you can use any kind of streaming device to stream to a TV.
Not at a restaurant.
Oh, there's no bar packages. Interesting. That I was not aware of.
There's no way for us to stream it. There is a package so going behind the scenes a little bit in the restaurant business. We have these sheets that tell us what channel everything is on, what what station, what time. Gives us a whole list of every single sport, every single day, every single time, everything. The only session that was on TV that was able to be shown was the actual race. And it was on a special channel through, most restaurants use DirecTV. That's what we have at almost every single restaurant I've ever worked at is DirecTV. There was only one channel that worked and it only showed the race. No practice sessions, no qualifying, no nothing. And as big of a company that I work for, which the people here who know me know what company it is, they don't even have that package. Not able to show Formula One on any of the TVs and during this whole thing. So I'm kind of perturbed about that, just being the fact that this is one of the biggest racing motorsport in the world. How is it that there's not a way for us to watch it on TV?
I mean, so just to clear, you can watch it on TV with an Apple TV Plus subscription. But as you said, for those that aren't aware, businesses operate differently. They have sports packages. They have to buy them differently. They don't just call up like Comcast, like, give me these channels, because otherwise you can't, again, if you actually, not that anyone reads this, if you read your personal use TV contracts and your streaming contracts, it is for your use only. You cannot charge people to come watch it on your TV. But bars can, because they have a completely different way of acquiring sports packages, and Formula One is not apparently available to purchase for now. Maybe that'll get rectified. I feel like a lot of the kinks didn't get worked out. There were a lot of people complaining because I actually didn't realize this until Sunday after I'd watched the race, because I didn't really care. But I guess the Sky Sports feed is available on Apple TV. If you went into the main one that they showed, it was the Formula One TV feed, which we used to be able to buy as well. Now they've canceled that in the States because
that one still works.
It works until I think March something. They're gonna if you prepaid for a year, it'll keep up for a little bit, but then they're gonna cancel it off because Apple owns the streaming rights too. So that Apple F1 TV Premium, the one that came with all the racing live and all that in the archives, is gone. With that said, apparently somewhere down the Apple TV you could find the Sky feed and watch the Sky feed, which is the same one that ESPN. I didn't care to, but I guess a lot of people were mad that Crofty and Martin were not available, and they had to settle for. It was God, I forget the main commentator's name, but it was Joyanne Palmer and David Coulthard were the two racing analysts. So that's what I watched, and I was like, "This is fine. I don't really care." But apparently, a lot of people were really mad. And then apparently, part of the Apple package is there's Sky feeds in there. You just have to go find it. They didn't do a good job, I guess, making that visible so people could see it. So there's a lot of people upset about that as well. Oh well, this is just like the cars. This will evolve over time. Hopefully, it get better. So
it'll get better.
We will see. It'll be a middle of the night one this week, and we'll see if there's any improvement to that. And Evan, thanks for joining me. Everyone, thanks for watching in overnight this weekend in China, and then we'll be back to preview Japan, which is another calendar and time zone unfriendly race, but we'll be back for that as well. Everyone, we'll see you all next week.